Here is how to basically dismantle a picket post driver. The first thing we're going to do is remove the guide, remove the retaining nut, change the striking dolly, change the guide to show you how to fit a new guide, fitting a new striking dolly or an interchangeable striking dolly to suit driving in a plug or a cap, which you require for 3-inch, 2-inch, 4-inch water pipe, and many of the other different shaped guides that you need to change a striking dolly. These are the 4 basic tools you require, which is a 4mm Allen key, a shifting spanner, a screwdriver, and a C-spanner suitable for a 70mm diameter shaft. You need the C-spanner to undo the actual cylinder out of the frame. Disassemble the driver, we first have to remove the guide, depending on what sort of guide you have in. This is a 3-inch guide, or a guide which is used also for 80 nominal bore pipe. So we undo the grub screws and lock nuts in 4 places. remove the retaining nut by undoing the grub screw and lock nut which holds it in place. Unscrew the retaining nut. We're then going to undo the hose clamp, which is there just to stop the deflector from rattling. There's also a grub screw that goes through both the muffler, the deflector and into the cylinder, keying into the head of the frame, which secures the cylinder in alignment with the frame. When this is assembled, a small amount of Loctite is used to stop this grub screw from undoing. Then you pull the deflector off, the muffler will come away, and what you are left with is the cylinder screwed into the frame. At this point, the best way to undo this is with a C-spanner onto the cylinder, and a dolly is used to loosen it. Unscrew the cylinder out of the frame. It has a fine thread, so it takes a little while to do this. Top of the cylinder we have the most important part of the driver, which is the valve. There are three parts to the valve: the cap, an inner sleeve, the valve itself, or the valve, the outer body of the valve, and two locating pins. You will note that when you return to replace this valve back on, you must align the hole positions in the base of the valve with the top of the cylinder, just like that. Then the inner sleeve goes in and the cap goes on. I will now demonstrate disassembly again. You can actually take the whole valve off, the locating pins come away. To disassemble the valve, there's three parts: the cap, the inner sleeve, which is a very, very neat fit, and the outer sleeve, and that's the valve. The most common problem we have with this machine is the inner sleeve of the valve rusts in the outer sleeve. And a lot of people pull this off believing that this is all one piece, whereas in fact it is two pieces, and the third piece is the cap. That is complete driver disassembled. Piston, cylinder, inner sleeve of the valve, valve outer sleeve, valve cap, locating pins. To reassemble a Picket post driver, we have all the basic parts here and the tools required. Firstly, the cylinder, then the piston. You then simply slide, making sure that the small diameter of the piston goes down into the cylinder first. You would apply a bit of light oil, which we prefer to use is called Inox, I-N-O-X. top of that, you then put the 2 locating pins. The locating pins can only go in 2 holes. If you try and put those locating pins in any of the other holes on the top of the cylinder, they will simply disappear out of sight. So you've obviously put them in the wrong place. The valve, which is the most critical part of this whole machine, needs to just go together nice and smoothly like that. Again, a very light oil like inox. If you do not have a light oil, use a sewing machine oil or even diesel. You then check to line up the hole pattern the same as the top of the cylinder, like such. The cap then just sits on top of the valve like that, and it's ready to assemble into the frame. There is nothing in the frame except the head with a thread. So by putting that on a table like that, you can simply slide the cylinder up in there, turn it around by hand until it engages into the thread. And then by supporting the bottom of the cylinder with your hand, just screw the cylinder up into the frame. Once the cylinder is firm in the frame, you take a C-spanner, which is designed to fit a 70mm diameter cylinder, catch it in one of the exhaust holes, and by using a dolly or a plug, simply tap that up tight. Till the hole lines up with a slot. Check that before you fit anything else in, that you've got that alignment. And I've got to hit that a bit harder. You do have to tighten this cylinder up extremely tight with the C-spanner, a dolly or a plug to hit it, or a hammer obviously. And then you're looking for a hole to line up with one of these slots in the head. So we've lined up this particular hole, we've checked that it's in alignment, and at this point you would apply a little piece of Loctite to your thread so that when you fit it, it is extremely tight after a while. What we are then going to look at doing is lining up the exhaust holes with the muffler and where we're going to put the grub screw through. So we're going to just turn this around until we find a suitable position. There we have. These exhaust holes are coming out through the cutout, the muffler. Again, the screw is going to enter through that to tie the 3 parts together. And then what we're going to do is put on our deflector. What the deflector does is, as the exhaust is exhausted out through the cylinder, through this muffler area, it hits the inner sleeve of the deflector and obviously deflects it straight down. Pop that on there. Make sure again the grub screw lines up all 4 parts now, which it is, and tighten that up. We are relying on the Loctite that you apply to the grub screw to make sure it doesn't undo. You can do this up very tight to stop the tendency for them to undo. Once you've done that, you look at fixing the hose clamp back on over the deflector, making sure it goes on over the top edge of the grub screw. Tight. Now we're going to put back on our retaining nut cylinder. the guide goes back on, do up 4 grub screws and lock nuts, secure the guide in the frame. You may notice when you're using the driver that this retaining nut rotates slightly. It is of no problem because the retaining nut cannot undo because it is held captive with this particular guide in place, held in the frame with the 4 grub screws. When we originally manufactured the drivers, we did not have this grub screw and lock nut on the retaining nut, and the retaining nut did rotate. And the only reason we put the grub screw and lock nut on it later on, we subsequently designed breaker points, rammers, bead breakers, which are used without a guide, and hence we needed to secure the retaining nut from undoing. And that's why it was later fitted to more recent models in the last 10 years. So that is an assembled picket post driver.